Okay, here's a rough understanding of motion persistence blur. Let's go. Let's start with a sample and hold display. Sample and hold. So let's think of a sample and hold display as a sparkler. Here's the sparkler. Oh, yeah. We're gonna swing that thing around like this, back and forth. It's gonna blend the light together. That's how a sample and hold display is like. Look at our frames. They're all blended together. We call that the afterglow, like the glow in between the frames. The not afterglow, after image. We call that persistence, or persistence of vision, which is like an optical illusion where the visibility of the light from the sparkler or the frame doesn't cease even after the light enters or stops entering your eye. So you're still going to see the frame in between even every time you transition to the next frame. And let's just blend that all together. So these are two categories, OLED and LCD. So the way you want to reduce the persistence or the after image is you want to fill in the gaps between the frames. You want to make the blackness, the darkness, larger. So you want to reduce the persistence in between each frame. That's going to be at the expense of the light output of the display. So some people don't really like this, but I do. So that's why I'm explaining it right now. So there's an issue with this. You can't just continuously, let's say this is the timeline of the frames. This is all your frames right here. Let's say we have something called black frame insertion. It's like a strobing technique to reduce the persistence. Remember, the blur. So you have an OLED and an LCD. The disadvantage of the LCD is that you can't continuously increase this black frameness as you increase the refresh rate. So you can't just keep going more and more without running into this problem where you try to increase this reduce the persistence, but you can't because you got a gray to gray latency. OLEDs don't really have that problem, so we're not going to worry about that. So let's go back to this. Let's say, for an example, 60 hertz display. We're going to calculate this by taking the 1000 pixels per second, or like moving the camera 1000 pixels per second divided by 60 hertz. So we're going to throw that in a calculator. 1000 divided by 60 is equal to 16.67 milliseconds of something called MPRT, motion picture response time. And this is kind of like how long a pixel is continuously visible for. So if it's the higher your MRPT, the higher this blurriness, the less of a gap there is in between these frames. So the less darkness. So if you have a high MRPT, you're going to have a lot of this going on. If you reduce it, you're going to have more of this. So this is for a sample and hold display. And again, you can't continuously increase your refresh rate. So for example, let's say you have a 240 hertz display. See right here, 240 hertz. And let's throw that in a calculator. This is the maximum MRPT that is possible at 240 Hertz on a sample hold display. 4.67 milliseconds MPRT. Sorry, I always mix these two up. So this is kind of going to limit this because you can't just keep going because there's a latency, the gray to gray latency. Oops. It's just going to kind of reduce the maximum motion clarity possible because it's going to fill in your gains between your persistence reduction. So that's why OLED for now is the preferred sample and hold display for using black frame insertion because you're not going to run into these issues. So it's infinitely scalable. And not perfectly, but almost infinitely. So let's switch on over to plasma. So this is something called a impulse display. So no sample and hold. It doesn't hold the frame. It's not like a sparkler where it's like this. No, it's like this. It naturally, and I'm trying to show this as like the black floor, the pure darkness, like the darkness. See, let's show like a black floor. It'd be right on a sample and hold with black frame insertion. It'd be right at the black floor. So there wouldn't be this area of visible light. But on a plasma there is, because it does something called a subfield strobe rate. And it basically means it strobes, or flashes is probably the correct term, flashes 10 times, sometimes 8 times, but usually 10 times per one frame. But see here, it's not like boom, boom, boom. It's not perfectly linear. So what happens is that like 2 to 3 or 20 to 30% of a single frame is really bright, but then the other half is not so bright. And basically that's how it has the motion clarity it does. 20 to 30% is brighter than the rest of the frame, so there's no increasing it through in frame insertion or whatnot. So let's do a calculation. So on a sample and hold display right here, you have a maximum MRPT of 16.67 milliseconds, but the frame is only visible 20 to 30%. Not exactly, it's just perfectly visible, but it's much brighter in this area versus it just has a lower visibility time of 20-30%. So you take the 16.67 milliseconds and we're going to divide that by the average of the two. So it'd be 20 plus 30 divided by 2 is equal to 25%. So we're going to times that by 0.25. 16.67. I'm going to punch this into the calculator. Whoops. I also read this wrong. Oh, well, whatever. We're going to times them. This is a better way to show that. And that comes out to 4.168 approximate. These are all approximate milliseconds. And this is the maximum persistence reduction possible. But like an LCD, you're suffering from gray to gray. latency. So it's not exactly this. It's very much approximate. So it'd probably be closer. It's going to be either somewhere between 4 to 5. So let's find the average of the two. Plus 5. I should have known that, but okay, so it's going to be approximately 4.5 milliseconds, depending on the kind of plasma you have. This is just different depending on model and age and whatnot. So that's why you can't increase the motion persistence. You can't increase the refresh rate because you're going to be limited by this gray to gray. So no matter what you do, you're going to be limited. So you're not going to be able to increase the visibility or reduce the amount of persistence, the blurriness, the afterglow. Yep. Okay, let's move on to CRT. Let's do a snazzy red color. So our CRT is a little bit different. It's going to draw frames similar to how a sample and hold versus a plasma, which doesn't kind of draw a frame in, it just flashes it on the whole display at once. A CRT is like a little, let's say quote unquote, pixel of light. And see how there's just this continuous line of the frames. Think of a CRT like this, and you know the little visibility time, the persistence. Let's just say that's what you're dealing with a CRT. You got a lot of room, and it's not perfect. The phosphors. So basically, a CRT is like an electron gun, shoots electrons at a phosphorus layer, and that starts glowing once it hits it. So this can't lower the amount of light fast enough. It can't decay quick enough. So there's just a little bit of like a trail, like a little ghost. It's just like a little ghosting. CRTs just suffers from that. But that's beside the point. A CRT's has just so much persistence reduction, you can just automatically assume, disregarding this ghosting, that it always has 1 millisecond of MPRT. I always mix that up. MPRT. And you don't want to know what 1 millisecond MPRT is equal to? Remember? 1,000 pickles 1,000 pixels per second is equal to 1,000 hertz sample and hold. So you could be let's say your CRT can do 38 hertz. Seems really low. Still 1 millisecond of MPRT. So this is my kind of crappy, thrown together, educational, easy understanding of motion persistence blur. So if you have any questions, just kind of leave them in the comments. I'm not an expert. This is just my vague understanding of it. So thank you.